Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Luis Chavez, and in this week's video I wanted to talk about the Ricoh GR3 and the Leica Q2. I get tons of questions since a lot of my channel revolves around these two cameras. So whether you own the Leica Q2 or the Ricoh GR3, I get questions on which one should I get or which one's best. But this video is not so much on which one's better, but depending on your needs as a photographer, whether you should go with the Leica Q2 or the Ricoh GR3, or if you own either one of these cameras, if adding the other would benefit your kit. So I'm just going to talk about each camera individually first, and then talk about the similarities that have, and then kind of like the drawbacks of each one of these cameras. So the Leica Q2 has a 47 megapixel full frame sensor, and it also comes with a summilux 1.8 lens attached to it. So both of these cameras, they're fixed lens cameras. So for this one, it's a 28 millimeter lens at f1.7. And what I really like about the Leica Q2 is that you can focus very quickly, because it does have like a focusing scale here on the lens. So as you can see here on the camera, it's super easy to manually focus, but also if you want to zone focus, you get right here right on the lens a focusing scale, so you can very quickly focus on your subject, but also change your f-stop if you want. So those are things that I really like if I want to shoot very fast. So I'm super thankful that this camera has that, and it's one of the main reasons why I love to pick this one up. I don't normally shoot with this camera in super low light settings, but what's great about this is that it does have a image stabilization inside of the camera, so you can do a lot of handheld shots with this camera that you normally wouldn't if it didn't have image stabilization. So I always turn it on whenever I want to get anything that's super low light and I want to get, lower ISOs in my photos. So another great feature is the shutter. So it's a leaf shutter, so it's really silent. So if you're doing anything like street photography or even weddings, people are not going to notice you as much, especially since the camera is pretty small. But the shutter noise is very minimal, so if you're ever in a situation where you don't want to disturb a scene, it's not going to take away from anything. So let me see if you can pick it up here with my microphone on my camera. So as you can hear, it's very small, very silent, I should say. So yeah, it's one of the best features of this camera, and most of these like compact cameras too. So the Leica Q2 is all metal construction. So these cameras are actually hand assembled in Germany, so you get that premium feeling whenever you pick up this camera. So it's definitely feels like it's a solid camera, and it's not going to break on you anytime soon. So it's something I really appreciate. So I really appreciate the design of this camera. It kind of has like a hybrid kind of look between like a rangefinder but also like a mirrorless camera. So yeah, it's the branding and everything is pretty minimal here, but like I've said in previous videos on my Leica Q2 first impressions, I like the fact that it has minimal controls all over the camera, and they're all where I think they should be. So the shutter is, the shutter speed is right here, but also the lens has a lot of manual controls that you can change in with this dial here for the ISO. Something I really like about the Leica Q2, especially with its 47 megapixel sensor, is how you can crop into photos. So as you guys know, I like to crop into my photos and recompose as much as I can. So let me show you on this camera right here. If you press this button right here, it'll take you from the regular 28 millimeter focal length, and it'll take you to 50, and then 35, then 50, then 75 millimeters. So once you get to 75 millimeters, you're down to the 10 megapixels, but more than not, I'm usually, if I'm cropping that much, it's just for like social media or for like family and stuff. So it's not a big deal to me, but even if you crop in at 35, you still get plenty of resolution to play around with. So something I really appreciate about this camera is the battery life. I usually carry on a couple batteries, but that's just because I'm a wedding photographer and videographer, so I'm conditioned to just bring tons of batteries. But usually I don't even go through one. I've actually shot with this camera for a couple of engagement sessions, and both of these sessions were about 2 hours long, and I never ran out of battery. If anything, it got to like halfway done or to 1 bar, but that was about it. And I took about 400-500 shots. I would turn off the camera in between sometimes, but I'm really impressed with the amount of battery I get out of this camera. So yeah, that's something I really appreciate. And what I really like about these batteries is that there's no door, so I can switch them out very quickly, as I said before. So these are the batteries for the Leica Q2. So they're a little bit heftier, but it doesn't bother me as much at all, and you know, it's very easy to switch around. So yeah, 2 or 3 batteries, I guess, would be like the sweet spot. But honestly, you can go, you can own this camera with 1 battery and still be fine if you're only shooting for a couple hours at a time. So something I really like about this camera that it's not talked about much is the video functionality of this camera. When it came out, people had talked about how it wasn't really, you know, it could shoot some video, but it wasn't like videographer centric because you didn't have any manual controls for this camera. But they did a firmware update eventually, and now you can do full manual controls on the Leica Q2 for video, and you can shoot up to 24 frames a second at C4K, so it's like a cinema 4K for the Leicas, and it's a beautiful image. So if you saw my video a couple of videos ago, the video I did with the Cinebloom filters, the A-roll was shot with the Leica Q2, so I was really impressed with the level of video that I can get out of that camera. So I would feel super comfortable shooting video with that camera. Although I don't do it much, I like to know that the camera that I bring along most of the time shoots very good quality video. So the Leica Q2 is also weather sealed. So if you find yourself in all kinds of weather conditions like snow or rain, you have that peace of mind that your camera is not going to break and nothing's going to get inside of the camera. So one of the things I like the most about the Leica Q2 is the viewfinder and the screen. I've shot with all kinds of cameras over the years, and by far this is my favorite viewfinder. It's nice and bright, and I always find it that I compose well with this. So if you like to compose your shots with a viewfinder and not so much a screen, the Leica Q2 might be your best bet. So it's nice and bright, and if you like to bring a camera up to your eye and just compose that way and to meter that way, this is a great camera. The Ricoh GR III also has a great screen, but it doesn't have a viewfinder. So if you like to if you like viewfinders, this might not be the best camera for you. So the Leica Q2 does have some cons, and one of the biggest ones is the price. The price of this camera is $5,000, brand new. So yeah, it's quite a hefty price for a non-interchangeable lens camera. So if you don't want to go all into a camera that only has 1 focal length, which is 28, if that's too wide for you, this might be the best value for you. But for those of you who are kind of in the know with Leicas, you know that summilux lenses are pretty up there in price, so about $6,000 and up there. So if you look at it from, you're buying the lens and then you're getting a body attached to it, it's a pretty good deal. But whether or not you can justify the price, that's still a pretty hefty price for most people, especially if this is going to be like a hobby camera or like a secondary camera. So that's a big con with the Leica Q2. So the Leica Q2 does have some cons, and one of the biggest ones that I could think of, especially from my experience, is the fact that there's no ports. So I've gotten used to it over the amount of time I've had it, but there are no ports in this camera. So if you can see all over the body, it has dials and buttons, but no actual ports. So it would have been nice to have like USB-C charging or anything like that. So if you want to charge the batteries for this camera, you have to use, an external battery charger. So yeah, it did get a little annoying in the beginning, but once you get used to it, it's not that big of a deal, at least especially for me. But yeah, that was a big con whenever I got this camera, because whenever you're a photographer, you kind of just want your batteries to charge very quickly, and carrying around battery chargers on vacation is not that much fun. So if I could have just had one USB-C cable to charge all of my cameras, that would have been amazing. But yeah, this camera has no way to charge it unless you use another charger. So another con for this camera, it's a little hefty. So if you are doing street photography or like an everyday camera, you have to get used to the weight, carrying that around with you. So if you're not used to that, this might not be the best camera for you. As you can see with the Ricoh GR3, the size difference is quite drastic, and even the weight is quite drastic. So if portability is a big aspect for you, this might not be the best camera for you. But if you don't mind bring along a bigger camera, then the Leica Q2 is a great camera. So moving on to the Ricoh GR3, this camera has a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. So most of the time people, when they think about APS-C, they think of Fuji. So the Fuji X100V and this camera are APS-C size sensor cameras. So this camera is slightly smaller than that. So it's something I really appreciate about this. It's something that you don't see with a lot of cameras, because usually when it's something this small, it's like a 1-inch side sensor. So the fact that you get such a powerful sensor in this small body is pretty amazing. So another thing I like about this camera is how fast it powers on. And if you saw my review, you've seen this already, but look at that. It's so quick. So if you see a shot and your camera's not even on, it goes on right away. And it's something that I don't see with a lot of cameras. Even the Leica Q2, it takes a little bit to start. And so that's why I usually leave the camera on for the Leica Q2. But this one, I have no problem turning it on and off because it powers on so quickly. So another thing I really like about the Ricoh GR III is the touchscreen. It's really, really sensitive, and it's something that I really appreciate with this camera. So for someone who really likes to use touchscreen in a lot of different cameras, and even it reminds me a lot of like smartphones. I'm surprised a lot more cameras not like this. So the touchscreen is very, very responsive. So if you want to have full control of the way that you like to focus, you can do so. So it has a lot of different focusing options here. So if you want to just go full auto, you're allowed to do that. You can do that. But if you want to have more control, there's select autofocus, pinpoint autofocus, tracking, continuous, and manual focus. I don't really manual focus with this camera very often. It being such a small camera, it's not something that appeals to me. But there's so many different ways to focus with this camera. So if you're very particular about zone focusing, because you can zone focus with this too, it's very good to customize it how you want it. And something that I'm actually already on that I really appreciate about this camera is that you get a sub menu. So with this camera, you can customize this, and you're able to access a lot of the controls that you want to access as much very quickly. So you can access like things like the focus, the image control. So if you want to have any like film simulations, which this camera has, I usually shoot everything with positive film for the JPEGs, and then I edit RAWs, since you can shoot on both at the same time. And you can also switch out if you want to just shoot in RAW or RAW and JPEG. So one of my favorite features by far is the highlight weighted metering on this camera. So if you are familiar with this camera, you know that you can meter for your highlights, and then it'll adjust your exposure so the highlights are preserved, and then you can bring everything back in post if you want. But if you want to, have some really interesting photos in there with a lot of dark shadows and high contrasty scenes, you can do that. So this makes it really easy to preserve highlights, which some cameras are not the best at doing so. So yeah, that's something I really, really appreciate with this camera. So what I really like about the Ricoh GR III is that you can charge this camera via USB. So if you just want to bring around a cable and a brick and no external charger for your batteries, you don't have to, and you can just charge it right on the camera. And that's not something you can do with the Leica Q2. So a big plus of this camera is how tiny it is. So if you can see here, it's definitely much smaller than the Leica Q2. And I already did a comparison, but here we go again. So the weight difference and the size difference is pretty drastic. So if portability is something that you appreciate, this camera is definitely for you, because you can just put it in a jacket pocket and you won't even notice that it's there. But if you want to get a quick picture, you can take it out, take the photo, and it's already done. So this camera shutter is also very quiet, just like a Q2. So I can show you from turning it on to a photo here. As you can see, it's very, very quiet. So if you shoot street photography, this is something that you really, really like, because you can take as many photos as you want and you don't really bother anybody. So if especially if you don't want to disturb a scene or anything like that, you can take as many photos and people don't normally bother you. I've taken this camera everywhere and I've never been stopped, but with the Leica Q2, I've been stopped a couple times asking about the camera, what kind of camera it is, or if they're Leica fans, whether or not I like it and stuff like that. But with this camera, no one really knows that you're around, and you can, get really good photos without being disturbed. So some cons with the Ricoh GR III is that it's not weather sealed. So if you want to shoot in the rain, you have to really, really be careful, because water could get in there and you can damage your camera. Same thing with dust. There's some reports, I've not experienced this myself, but there have been reports of dust getting into the lens. So I'll be very careful with that. I've had this camera for over a year now. I have not experienced any type of dust in a sensor or anything, but I would be very careful with that. Another con, again, this is not something that I've experienced, but I know that some people have experienced in the past. This little ring here, it's pretty easy to take off. So it's very easy to lose it. So you have to be careful with that. But again, I have not experienced this, but it's something to be wary of. So this little filter or this little ring does come off. But if it does come off and you need to replace it, you could find these fairly cheap. And if you want different colors, you can also find these on Amazon. So I'll link to some of these in the description if you want replacements for this. But It's never been an issue for me, but it's something to keep in mind. So another con with the Ricoh GR3 is that although it does take video, the video is not very good, so I never shoot video with it. I actually disabled it. But if you want a camera that can do both, definitely it's not the Ricoh, but if all you want to do is take photos with it, this is a great choice. So one of the biggest cons with this camera is the battery life. So this battery is pretty small, which I appreciate, but you don't get that many shots if you are shooting around town. So you would have to bring a couple of these with you. So if you can see how big this battery is, yeah, it's pretty small, but it's something I appreciate. So if you don't mind bringing 2 or 3 or 5 batteries with you, you know, it's not that big of an issue, but you get around 200 shots at best with this camera. So something to keep in mind. If you just want to bring one battery, it's not going to last you very long. So some similarities with both of these cameras is that they're both 28mm focal length. The Leica is 1.7 and the Ricoh is 2.8. But if 28mm is a focal length that you really like, both of these are in your wheelhouse. Both of these cameras also shoot in macro mode. So if you like to take a lot of macro photos, both of these cameras are great with that. So they both have a way to access it very quickly. So with the Leica, there's this ring that you can switch out to that goes into macro mode, and you can shoot macro mode very easily, and you know, it switches out the focusing scale and everything for you. And with the Ricoh GR3, it does have a button that you can press up here, and it'll take you into macro mode. So I'm also going to show you photos taken with both of these cameras at the same time, so you can see what kind of results you get. But I'm also going to link the raw files in the description so you can see the difference between both of these cameras. And I'll show you both JPEGs and RAWs and edited RAWs as well, so you can kind of see the type of editing that I do with these photos. So as you can see, you get great results with both of these cameras. So, you know, although one of them has a higher megapixel count than the other, you can get great results with any camera if you enjoy the shooting experience with the camera. So I got some questions about shooting in low light with these cameras, and since both of these have image stabilization built into the cameras, you can get really clean images at lower ISOs, but if you're shooting anything about like 3200 or 6400, you get quite a bit of noise, and I usually stay away from high ISO situations, but like I've said in the past, I'd rather have a grainy photo than a blurry photo. So if I have to go to like 6400, I'm comfortable doing so, but if you're going up that high, keep in mind that you're gonna get some noise. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys who are interested in either one of these cameras. I like having both because I do love the 28mm focal length, but sometimes I just want to bring around a point and shoot with me, and that goes a long way. And you know, shooting experience goes a long way with me. So if I have a camera in hand, I want to take a photo, and you know, if I'm lugging around a big camera in a setting where it doesn't really warrant having a big camera, that kind of can hinder my shooting experience. So for those situations where I just want to bring around no bag and just put this in my jacket pocket, this is great for that. But if I want something that has a really nice resolution, but also I can compose with a viewfinder and it's weather sealed. I'll definitely go on with the Leica Q2. So thank you so much for watching this week's video. If you have any questions on either one of these cameras, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. And yeah, if you like this video, please give it a like. And if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe for more videos and I'll see you next time. Bye.